Welcome to Martechify, the community of marketing professionals interested in Martech, digital marketing, and AI. And I'm your host today, Ekaterina Konovalova. And I would like to welcome to our show Satya Upadhyaya. He's a seasoned Martech expert. He talks at many different conferences and different thought leadership events about Martech. He was recently the head of Martech at ANZ Bank, as it's pronounced in Australia. And he's joining us today from Sydney. Welcome, Satya.
Thank you. And is that good evening, Katina, for you in the US, and good morning for my viewers here in Sydney? Really excited to be part of the show and share my experiences.
Well, let's talk about your experience. You've worked in so many different industries, lately in FinTech, but I would love to get your story and hear about your background.
That's a difficult question. Let me try to summarize who I am. Yeah, I've been in the Martech space for about 15 years, thought leader with mixed experiences, which is a good mix. And I say I've worked on client side and consulting side. I've worked with business teams and technology teams and engineering teams. I've also looked at campaign operations and campaign design. I've managed teams both in the Martech front end and back end capability delivery, which you call building and running. So I've done that. I've had some experiences across some good global brands, just to name a few, like you got Citibank, HSBC, Bankwest. I've worked in casino operations, membership-based organizations, healthcare. And as you said, my last role, which I just finished yesterday, was with ANZ Bank as head of Martech decisioning and execution. And as part of my role, I had a wider portfolio looking after real-time data, digital data, app and secured banking, a platform like the likes of Unica, Adobe, and a few more, and operational notification. So yeah, that was me. But if you want to summarize where I normally get called for help is that in the Martech landscape, there's three things that you're doing. One is either you're engaged in buying the technology. That's where you go with RFP, business requirements, understanding what you need. And then is once you've bought it, you actually want to plumb that technology and ecosystem with capabilities, software, data, and then once you've got that, it's all about within the organization, which is called the run phase of adoption, utilization, and best practices, and how you get the whole thing together. So I normally work in all those three domains, depending on if I'm doing a consulting project or within the organizations, where am I required? So whether it's technology transformation, which I call buying the capability, or enabling the capability, which is integrating that with the business, or operationalizing it, which is running it, improving your marketing processes, governance, how to do things simpler, better, faster, in consistency and standardization, and again, when a contract negotiation. So all of that inclusive. You talk to me about it, ready to talk about it.
All right, well, I have a lot of questions. I have some practical questions about FinTech and general questions about trends. So should we dive into FinTech discussion first?
Whichever you like. If you want to go to trends, you can go into trends. If you want to talk about banking and FinTech, more than happy to take it on.
Let's talk about FinTech and save the trends for the later part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Go for it.
So with FinTech, obviously, there's a trend towards personalization. I just had a conversation with HubSpot about their inbound conference and the latest features and how we're navigating away from hello name to a really custom AI-driven personalized messages for each person. And it's a common trend everywhere, but FinTech is a highly regulated industry. So you cannot be overly creepy with all your knowledge about the customer or prospect and barrage them with really custom personalized messages. So how, on one hand, there is a trend and expectation for more personalized messages that meets the requirements of very regulated industry. So how do you bridge the gap in Martech and in marketing execution to achieve the balance between being an innovator, but also comply with strict regulations?
Great question. Now, you actually answered the first part, right? So we've actually moved a bit more from personalization, and I had another article that I talked about what's the difference between, and personalization has different names. You got personalization, hyper personalization, one-to-one personalization, individualization, and what do you really mean around that? But it really started from saying, dear customer and hello name, to really identifying that person with a name. So who you are, where you are, what you want, what you do, and that's where personalization came in. Right now, the other thing that's coming with marketing consent. So I think personalization and the boundary that really come in that I have a lot of information about you, I know a lot about you. And so long as you're using that information, and that's not only, it's not about, and a lot of people talk about financial services being regulated. If you go into casino operation, that's also regulated in a way. If you look at healthcare, highly regulated. So it's all about the information that you've got access to and how do you actually use that information for the benefit of the customer. Are you, and that's where it says, a lot of organizations say that we are customer focused and customer centric. But the reality is they work on a P&L and L and they're very product centric. And that's why that creepy thing happens, because if you're looking at your P&L and you're product centric, you're always trying to communicate with a customer to sell them, cross sell them, and upsell something. It's not about the customer at the heart, but if you're looking at your customers, you're trying to serve the customer for the benefit of the customer. So that's one segue. But again, coming back to the point is that personalization and how it becomes creepy is that if you manage your consent and preferences very well, and consent and preferences have also evolved in the last 10 years. You've got GDPR, you've got the California Act, you've got privacy principle in Australia, and many things happening in that regard. So earlier marketing preference was yes and no. So either you basically opt into marketing or you opt out of marketing. And a lot of people opted out of marketing. When you have preference and contact management, what it looks at is that maybe I want to talk to you about certain things and I don't want to talk to you about certain things. I want to talk to you about certain things in certain channels. Maybe I'm happy for you to talk to me on an email, but not on an SMS. Or maybe wait, but don't give me a call. Or I'm happy to talk to you in AM and not in PM. So if you start using those as boundaries and then again purpose that what benefits the customer, I think you're good. As soon as you actually cross that boundary, that's where the whole thing starts getting creepy. And again, a customer does not mind. And there's another contact protocol. How many times can you contact a customer? It also depends. In some countries, like in Australia, we had some laws where you can't contact them X number of times, more than X number of times, or in Thailand or Southeast Asia where you can contact a customer 20 times a day. But again, if it's relevant, the customer is forgiving because it's value addition to the conversation for the customer. But if it's not relevant, the customer does not like it. So I think that's the blurring line between privacy and personalization is that when you're talking to a customer, are you talking to them on something which is a value add to the customer and it's actually benefit for the customer? There's a perception gap and the experience gap. Organizations think that they're providing a great experience, but the perception of the brand, and that's the brand perception, you can say, but the outcome of the customer is that you're not helping me, you're not solving my problem.
Right. Yes. And you touched a little bit on the law in Australia or in Thailand. I'm really curious about the Australian regulations. Are you allowed to solicit customers, for example, purchase an email address and send them communication until they opt out? How does it work in Australia?
I'm not really. There's 13 privacy principles, right? And it revolves around three things: how data is collected, how data is stored, and how data is used for marketing, communication, or analytics purposes. So within those boundaries, so you need to be able to disclose how this information is collected. So, for example, you might not have solicited that information directly. You might have taken from a third party. So you need to basically be able to identify how did you get that information from, and be able to present on the table to the customer. If the customer wants to have that record deleted, what process have you got for customer deletion of records?
And what would be the penalty for a company violating and not deleting the record?
You caught me on that one. I think it's $0.1 million or something. It's quite hefty.
Really?
It's not, you can't get away with that. So it is the privacy commissioner in Australia. They've basically come up with these 13 privacy principles. It's coming hard.
That's good to know. And you're absolutely right. There are some countries that do not have the same strict policies and they're literally spamming. I somehow got communication from other countries and I'm trying to unsubscribe, put it in spam, and I still somehow get these messages.
And that's a great example, like for GDPR. So if you think that you've got a customer that can interact with you from the European Union, although you might be based in Australia, you've got to follow the GDPR principles, because your website is global and it can be accessed from the European Union as well. So I think privacy now is not only domain. When I say domain, it's not country specific. It depends on your geography of operation. You're going to look at all the different privacy principles of all the different countries that come into account and actually have a strategy around it.
Right. Yes, that's very important. As you look at other industries, so you mentioned casino, FinTech, I'm sure education, and in general, when it's a customer sensitive data, I assume similar principles will apply in very strict policies and how you handle the data and maybe SOC 2 certification and similar policies, right?
Yeah, and again, and that also means, because sometimes you have access to a lot of data. But of that access, what is the amount of data that you can use for personalization or customer communication? There's sensitive data. You can't use sensitive data and use it for marketing promotions. So you got to be very, very clear of the data that's available, how much you can use that. Now, if you flip the conversation, everyone's talking about personalization, and one of the challenges that they talk about is that they don't really have enough data about the customer to personalize an offering. Right now, if I just this is very optimistic and thought provoking, that if I give you all the data that you need as a marketer or as a technologist, if I give you all, you have access to all the data, what are you going to do with that? So I think the learning curve here is that how do we actually do the crawl, walk, and run, right? So let's start with what we've got. So if I only have the first name and an email address, what can I do with that, and how do I actually do personalization? And as I progress the customer, or I nurture the customer in that journey, how do I actually collect more information about that customer and use that for competitive advantage for myself as a brand, but also for a great experience for the customer. And then in that process, the customer is more willing to share more information and enriching about information about themselves. So you enrich their profiles and use that for, targeting communication preferences and providing that great experience.
Right. And you're absolutely right, where you talked about relevancy for a customer. If they're getting value, yes, they're more open to receiving communication as well as giving more of their information. Versus if it's annoying, they want to opt out.
Absolutely. The other thing is, and with personalization, so one of the challenges that you have with personalization is firstly, profile unification and identity management. So you can have a customer sitting in different parts of your organization under different names and under different personas, and how do you actually unify that persona? So that's one challenge. Data sitting in different sources. You have technology which is not interconnected. So let's say, and this is a very interesting talk about technology in Martech. So you've got your CMS or your Apply, which is your website, which is your first point of contact for a customer, right? Sometimes they're in the prospect and suspect space, that they're actually floating around that. When they become a customer, so you look at your retention, your loyalty, that's, and that type of pooling of your above the line and below the line marketing. So how do you bring all that together, right?
Right.
You don't know what the left hand is doing to the right hand. So if you have one technology system, let's say your website, your CMS solution that's trying to fire off personalized communication, and then you're doing a loyalty campaign or an upsell or a cross-sell campaign through your other Martech platform, and they're not talking with hand in glove, it actually provides a disconnected experience. So how do you, and that's where the concept of multi-channel and omni-channel comes in, You want to talk to a customer across multiple channels, but the idea is that you're talking in the same tone, you're talking about the same offer across all those different channels. And when those offers are actually consumed in one channel, the other channels are aware of that. So you're not repeating that same offer in another channel. So again, how does the right hand know the left hand? So all the different data sources, all the different technology platforms, how they're talking with each other.
Yes, exactly. And many large corporations struggle with that. I know that a lot of existing platforms or customer data platforms, they are trying to optimize it. So again, bringing HubSpot as an example, they really advanced their feature of merging duplicates. Before you manually had to identify and merge them. Now they're using AI for that. So I can see the need in the market, but it's still far from being perfect.
It is. It's a bit of a journey, right? As you rightly talked about. So when the CDP term was not there, and I define CDP as a very good tool that basically does the profile unification and identity management and gets everything in one place. A tool designed by the marketers for the marketers, as compared to the traditional word of single customer view, which was designed for marketers but designed by technology, right? So, and that's where sometimes technology doesn't understand the full scope of what marketing needs. I think that's the progress that's been made. And then how do you actually use the CDP for activation, and then you do the execution through the channels.
Right. So let's talk about trends and future predictions, because clearly there is a trend of more AI, more optimization. But what is your take on AI and where do you think we're all headed?
I think AI is inevitable. It's not like you can't have AI, but if you draw, I think there's a lot of talk about AI. There's a lot of hype about AI, and there was one time, and I was actually in a CMO conference a couple of weeks back, and where we were in a panel and we've talked about there's some people are anxious about is AI going to be taking away a job? And then there are stats saying the number of jobs that will be taken by AI, but at the same time, there are stats that take the number of jobs that will be created by AI. So it's more around AI is going to repurpose your job, right? So the first thing it could do is look at remapping your processes. If you had many steps to do in a previous state of play, how can you shorten that? How can you use AI to actually eliminate repetitive tasks and reinvest that time in strategic thinking? And I think if you look at a marketing use case, the best use case that I think, which is very tangible at this stage, is creative and content creation. Migration of content. I was actually working on a project where how you look at migration of creative and content from one Martech ecosystem platform to the other. Again, that's repetitive work. How do you actually shorten that life cycle, right? I've got a great example where we looked at one of the challenges that you have in marketing operations is that the number of errors that you do in your T's and C's and your copywriting, right? And you have to basically
Right.
talk with legal and compliance, and you send legal and compliance a white paper, they basically send you back a red paper. A red paper basically means that everywhere they've got crosses and tick. This is dotting the I and crossing the T in the American way of saying it, that make those changes, right? So how do I actually incorporate all of that and reduce that manual work each time I'm doing it? There's tools in AI that basically help you do that, right? You basically upload your document. They'll say these are these are the T's and C's. This is what compliance was. This is what legal want, and this is where the gaps is. And they auto correct that, and all of a sudden a white paper goes in, and a white paper comes out. That's where you're getting efficiencies at scale, being able to do that. The next phase coming is in automated execution. How do you actually look at different decisioning, execution, channel segmentation, and being AI being able to help you through predictive modeling in terms of what the right offer is and how do you actually create. So that's when we talked about personalization, individualization, and segment of one. So I think marketing, again, that first question you said, hello customer, it's individual customers. For every individual customer, you have an individual offer that is relevant. Again, the basic principles of marketing remain the same: right time, right place, right offer. All the rights are there, but it's now executed through AI as a technology. Also, there are some bad, should I say, negative sides and shades of AI, where deep faking, right? You see a lot of YouTube
Yes.
videos in terms you don't know that you're speaking with Elon Musk, or you're talking with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is next to you in the aeroplane. All those different deep faking things are coming. So genuinity of the content that's coming is creating an issue. But if you actually go beyond, and I think AI has still not reached that space yet, which is called the word is technological singularity, and which means that the AI at a point will surpass human level intelligence. So when the AI surpasses the human level intelligence, what is the shape of the society going to be, right? Currently, AI is working on which is called narrow AI, and narrow AI is more about being able to handle one or two tasks. And then when you look at this human level intelligence and technological singularity, it will be able to handle multiple things at the same time. And the analogy, I was reading an article, it said, we have evolved from the monkeys or the apes. And how do we actually look at the apes and the monkeys today? Because we are more informed, more superior as a race, right? This is going to happen with AI and humans. Maybe 50, 60 years later, the AI is going to look at humans the way we actually look at the monkeys and the apes. So that's where technological singularity is coming in place, where AI is going to be super smart, it will exceed human level of intelligence.
Yes, and there are some talks about how you can augment some of the AI or chip and incorporate it in your body. So this way you can have immediate recall and store memories and process a lot of data. Obviously, now there are some experiments with Elon Musk's programs where people maybe with disability who cannot move their arms. And now I just recently read about that where they can use their brain to play a game and kind of control it with their mind, even though their hands are not working. So it's a little bit scary where it's headed, that bionic future of us blending biology of a human and the machine, but it's definitely already happening as we speak.
Yeah, and I think we should not be too concerned and fussed about what's going to happen 50 years ago. But I think in the very near future, as I said, it really will help automate tasks and remove the manual effort and the repetitive tasks, which means that, what I say is that, again, the Pareto's law of 80-20. You spend 80% of the time doing manual stuff, collecting data, and, not being able to synthesize and create insights from there. So similarly with AI, the effort is, let's say in marketing tech, right? The efforts and time that we utilize cleaning data, getting the offer, creative content, putting through the machine, running the campaign, executing the file, all of that, if that can be automated to the machine, I think the human brain then starts working on things that they're actually wired to do, which is creative thinking, strategic thinking, adding more value to the customer. So while the machine is doing all that heavy lifting for us and Martech becomes a key player for that, how do we actually think, how do we purpose our creative and content and our value proposition and our offer that provides a great customer experience, that basically provides a better value proposition from our organization to a customer? I think that's where it's heading.
Yes. What are your thoughts on mistakes and errors? So as we trust the machines to make a decision about personalization, pulling the data, maybe we have some wrong records or wrong information in CRM about the customer, and then the machine trusts that this is the correct information and they send them an offer that is completely off. So I'm curious about your vision about the kind of the security or quality control departments who will be overseeing those machine created offers.
I like this question and I want to basically give you an analogy from the old school, right? So when we were building campaigns manually, and when I say manually, you're extracting code to an information, what I used to call it is two things. One is failure to give instructions. The other one was to failure to follow instructions, which means that if the marketer has not given the right instructions, so I basically work on the instruction that was given. If I was given the wrong instruction, I produce a wrong output. If I was given the right instruction, but I failed to follow the instructions, I create the wrong output. The same thing happens with AI as well, right? If you give them the wrong instruction, it's going to produce the wrong output. But having said that, the power of AI is self-learning. So it learns as it basically goes through its own mistakes and basically reforms it and refines it and creates a better output. Now, where is it today? So, and again, this is not my word. Again, I'll refer to my AI conference that me and a fellow CMO were sitting and we were talking about. And his words were that treat AI as your junior brand manager. Someone who's actually very, or an intern who's very enthusiastic, who's basically wants to learn more things, has a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and wants to drive that, but can make mistakes. So AI in its current state is like that. It's very full of passion, full of energy, wants to do a lot of stuff, wants to help you everywhere, but it can make mistakes. So how do we actually tame or make the AI machine learn what needs to happen? And now again, coming back to the last question, when humans were doing stuff, you still had a QA department. And the purpose of the QA department would really do a checklist of what I asked you to do, and did you do that in the same order and the sequence? Similarly, you need to have a QA in the machine learning AI environment. I asked you to do X, Y, and Z. Did you produce X, Y, and Z, or did you produce A, B, and C, which is different to X, Y, and Z? And again, you can have an AI sitting on an AI to do that QA. And things will go wrong. But in the near future, I think you need to have a human to ensure that the things that's going out is actually correct, and you can't surpass the human brain. As I said, earlier, AI will surpass the human level of intelligence in the future, but it's not done that yet. Unless and till the time it's not done that, I think human intervention is quite critical. Because if something, especially if you're a financial institution, if you're a healthcare, right, a casino operation, let's say, package it regulated environment, even if you're not a regulated environment, anything that you send out to a customer and it's actually wrong, it has an impact. It has a financial impact. It has a reputational impact. It has rework. Means you guys basically remediate that, mitigate that. So there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to basically correct that. So you can't get it wrong.
Yes, absolutely. So my last question is, if you were to give an advice to someone who is entering marketing field and wants to be in Martech, what would you tell them?
Oh, this is a good one. So I call it the mistakes that shaped me. So when I was young, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe, and I used to be an analyst, I was very passionate about this real-time personalization, real-time data, automated execution. And then what I realized is that as you go through multiple system, different data sources, it becomes really a challenge getting all that right. So that's great to have that passion and providing that interconnected experiences, but go slow. The important is to really understand the overall Martech principles, understand the reference architecture, how those different technologies work hand in glove, how the data flows through across those systems, what are the upstream and downstream impacts and events that needs to happen. So spend a lot of time learning that, and then package that around the governance and mitigation in terms of how do you actually get it right rather than getting it wrong. So that's my advice in terms of how you would accelerate your career. There's a lot to learn in Martech. There are about 15,000 plus tools as per the Scott Brink Luminascape. So, you can't learn everything. And I did an analogy once that said, hey, if you spend a minute learning about it, how much time does it take? And if you take about 5 or 10 minutes, and I think when I did the 5 or 10 minute equation, it looked like that just to understand technology and spending 5 minutes of the 15,000 is about four months of time. You're not going to learn everything, but just focus on what those critical elements are, and following that Martech reference architecture really helps you. And then it's all about the breadth, right? You can specialize, there's the fat T and the tall T, right? So there are so many elements in Martech. So you can have insights, you have experience, you have channel, you have orchestration, you have intelligence, you have your core systems, your core platforms, right? Do you want to go as a breadth, or do you want to go depth on certain things? But initially, you might specialize in, let's say, orchestration or channel, or website web experience as compared to loyalty. But then, if you go into leadership roles, you need to understand people skills, how to actually interconnected experiences, how these different technology streams, Martech platform, how these different data capabilities. Got big data, first party, second party, third party data, all that. How do you bring all that together? So I think as you mature in your leadership roles, the breadth is more important than the depth. But in your initial days, you need to basically get the mastery in a few depths.
Yes, that's very good advice. Thank you so much, Satya.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure speaking to you briefly about the evolution of Martech and how AI is shaping it up, and in terms of talent, what's the future of talent going to be?